And the first person that we've invited up to talk is Doug Miller. Doug is a senior manager at Wostmann and Associates, and he's organizer of the Alaska Smart Communities Forum. He's been a project manager and consultant with 27 years of experience leading and executing projects in technology, finance, and operations. He holds a bachelor's degree from Cal Poly Pomona and an MBA from the University of California, Irvine. Doug is based in Anchorage and hosts two unique forums, the Alaska Smart Communities Forum and CIO Council Alaska, both of which help organizations network and share lessons on technology and management. Doug is talking with us today about creating partnerships among Alaska public and private organizations to share data and create tools to better serve citizens with information that they can use themselves. Please join me in welcoming Doug Miller.
I was telling Katie earlier, I'm usually doing your role. So presenting, because I host a forum that comes up quarterly. It's the CIO Council as well as I do the Smart Communities Forum. But they've been fun events, and I've been a pleasure to do them. What I'm going to do is just provide you a little bit of background. So as she said, I've been a consultant for over 20 years, and I'm the branch manager for Wostmann, and I host a couple of these forums, of which I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the Alaska Smart Communities Forum. And this is going to be a little tricky for me. Can I see the slides in front of my screen? Maybe if somebody...
I'm using that screen over there.
Gotcha. Okay.
And just the arrows.
Okay, so I'm going to see it over there.
Right.
Okay. All right. Okay. So this quick agenda is the smart community characteristics. I'm going to give you a quick speed through overview, 20 minutes on smart community characteristics. And I've called this from a number of articles and vendors that are all engaged in smart communities. You probably know ESRI, Dell, Cisco. They all have their smart community thing, as well as a few books. And I'll tell you about the forum, a small data survey that we did 3 years ago to kind of get an idea of data that people want, data that people have, and if there's actually any merits there. Challenges with the smart communities, of which we talked a bit about that this morning, and then fostering what we can do to foster smart community goals. So this might be a little bit remedial for a lot of you, but characteristics of the smart communities, right? It's integrated data available for anyone, automated workflow and streamlining processes, leveraging data on multiple devices, including mobile, more information in more ways. I actually called this from a charter that I developed for the Alaska Smart Communities Forum, working with the Mat-Su Borough. The Mat-Su Borough had the idea of starting up the forum. I developed a few pages charter about what the goals and the outcomes and success measures would be for that forum, and it became a fairly significant educational platform in Anchorage and Mat-Su. Apps used across departments and agencies and organizations and in partnering to share data, share costs, and share resources. I think there's been a lot of success on the first one. I think the cost is a little bit more elusive, and particularly the resources is much more elusive. Mat-Su Borough happens to have an example of a shared resource that they work out with a division of forestry and themselves in response to forest fires. On the cost side, it's usually everyone getting onto a shared platform. Not everyone can afford to put in a massive GIS platform. So, for example, the Mat-Su Borough, they invite Wasilla, Palmer, Houston to go ahead and participate and be an enterprise user on the GIS platform that the Mat-Su Borough has stood up over the last several years. Okay. Just a quick flash through. These are just articles that I culled this from a presentation I did about 18 months ago to the Alaska Planning Association, as well as my recent forum that we did. Orlando, digitizing city services. North Dakota IT department doing a statewide cybersecurity platform for the entire state, and that's not just state agencies. is the local agencies will actually be invited to get on essentially what will become a security platform. And actually, Alaska, if you don't know, is the current CISO for the state is looking into doing something or offering something similar, but a security operations center. And in San Diego, they happen to be one of my keynotes at the last forum about 6 weeks ago. I found them. I usually try to find a local government, county, or other state to be a keynote during our presentations in Alaska, just to see lessons learned from a different part of the U.S. And they happen to have an article that they're doing a number of things on crowdsourced apps, as well as essentially what has become a data repository, not data warehouse, but a data repository, somewhat akin to what I think they're talking about with the data hub. Other smart communities, I called this. This is from a book several years ago now. But Rancho Cucamonga, these has been a presenter at our forums, but New York, Boston, Rancho Cucamonga, crowdsourced apps, common apps that actually agencies contain data and now they're sharing data across agencies. And I'll give you one quick example of what all this might mean is I've got a worker that's responding to a particular need to a particular house, might be some sort of social service need, or maybe it's a check-in with a social service customer. But all of a sudden they can actually see not only they have a particular need that needing to be there, but are there other things in queue that are coming up that they could actually engage that resident with that is on another data platform, but it comes up onto their workbench, onto their mobile device, and they can engage the customer right then and there about those other services as they're talking with the resident. So it's trying to be much more responsive to customers, so a customer is not being engaged 2 and 3 and 4 times by different agencies. And other smart community examples. And I wanted to highlight 1, 2, 3. These have all been presenters at our forum. And one in particular was called out a shared resource support for Carver County. They have one resource at the county, but they actually rotate that person to the needs of the 6 cities in that county. So each city gets 2 to 4 days a month of that person's undivided attention to do customized GIS work for that particular city. So they're sharing that resource, and that's how they go about doing that. And that all these cities also share and contribute onto a common GIS platform. Similar thing for Pinellas County. That's Tampa. So Tampa area, and there's 24 cities in that county, all sharing on one platform. And on that platform, there's a data sharing agreement that each of those cities, they get to share on top of the GIS platform. And as a consequence, though, they have to feed data into that platform that becomes comprehensively available to the entire county. So the county's not having to chase down bits of information into these cities. Each of the cities is contributing their data set and the activities about storm drain plugs, maintenance required, other things. And they wanted to highlight the GIS manager I spoke with, 150 open data apps. So they've got a constant queue of applications, specific bits of information through an interface, mobile device, that are available for people to use to maybe find out about storm drains, or maybe crime data, or my next road closure. And this is one of their work dashboards for their personnel, and it just gives you an idea of what the workbench essentially looks like for their field operations personnel. And Alaska has been doing quite a bit of work on their own open data platforms. You'll hear a little bit more from Brendan here in a bit, but the GeoPortal, open data for Matsu, Muni. Muni actually has the GDIC, Data Information Center, DCRA Energy, and then a right-of-way application that I'll highlight here in a couple minutes by the state. So this is just quick examples. This is essentially the icons associated with data sets on DNR's open data site. This is, I didn't want to overcomplicate this presentation, but this is, and I'd like to leave this as a leave behind for reference if you have more questions. Mike Hendricks did a presentation for us back in February on the GeoPortal, but the idea is this is essentially trying to emulate what we've always talked about, well, for 3 years now, a portal of portals. You don't have to be all things in all one giant data warehouse or database. The idea is, to the spirit of federated services, right? You can have your own portal of information, but it could be a common portal where I either drill down immediately to a data set or I jump to someone else's portal. So from this portal, I could maybe jump to DCRA, I can jump to Matsu, but the idea is creating a common doorway, a little bit of what we talked about earlier today. This is Matsu's open data and the data sets that they have. It scrolls down, so they have several that are categorized in these different categories. And you can download those into CSV, or you can set an API against that data set, and they all have different periodicity in terms of how frequently those data sets are updated. And then some applications that they've built themselves. Again, this happens to be on the ESRI platform, but they have a storyboard about parcels and parcel realignment in the borough, fire insurance information. Parcel viewer is something that's heavily used in the valley by private citizens as well as by realtors. I don't see it here, but I mentioned this morning about the floodplain map, and you can see it before and after of the floodplain lines along individual properties following the updated LiDAR imagery. And they also have been building, on top of a SharePoint platform, e-commerce services. This all started really back in 2015, and I don't have the exact count, but I think they're at about 20 different services now, applications for driveway permits, business license applications, even swim lessons. And you'd be surprised, swim lessons is one of the more complicated services to actually buy online. This is I happen to have, this is a very overall presentation. This is the Anchorage's open data, an example of one of their crime maps. And they actually happen to track some statistics on their websites. So again, this is one lens that you can get access to what information people are most interested in. So the forum started, Eric Wyatt with the Matsu Borough, his IT director, really kind of came up with this idea locally 4 years ago. We're collecting a lot of data. People want easier ways to get information. Smart communities is a way to go about doing that. The smart communities and the open data concept, well, I guess we can all probably have been around for probably decades, but it started getting a lot of traction, I think 10 years ago, in terms of open data policies. And then smart communities, but essentially all that is being better at integrating the data that we have either within our city or our county or state. And what we tried to do with the forum is kind of bring people together and to talk about what data we have, what data do we want, and how do we leverage each other. And I have there's four tenets of the smart community: data, services, applications, services meaning applications, education, and partnerships. And real briefly, we have 7 distinct goals, but it's providing useful integrated information, reducing duplication of data and the tools, enabling employees to be more efficient, responsive, like I was talking about earlier, enabling towns to create their own smart communities. And what I mean by that is I live in Wasilla, and Wasilla doesn't need to create its own platform. They can leverage a lot of what is being built by borough and perhaps by state to really leverage that as data integration so they can actually give more information to their residents and serve them better without having to do the heavy lift themselves. And enabling citizens to be more involved in the government, and a lot of that's in notifications, being aware of what the meetings are, and being able to engage with your government and getting a permit without having to drive. And if you know Matsu, the size of West Virginia, it's quite a bit of an exercise if you live in Talkeetna and you have to go get a driveway permit or, frankly, sign up for a swim lesson. Be better informed about all the different things that are available to do in your city or your borough, services, economic opportunities. And one of our assembly members brought this up during our initial kickoff back in 2016, but is creating value-added services, and this is exactly what we're talking about here with the Data Hub. And just give you a taste of the participants. So we have local government, state government and affiliates, education, non-governmental, utilities, telecom, and some technology products and consulting, including myself. But ESRI is a major contributor to the forums. Dell, AT&T, particularly on this network. It's but their emergency call network that they're promoting throughout the country. Cisco, and then Gartner, if you don't know, is this a reservoir of a lot of good information and trends. And we've also had some particular funding I just want to call out too. Matsu Borough has been a heavy funder of my time in the forum that we set up in the Palmer area or Anchorage for the past few years. We're also starting to get more commercial sponsorship, trying to be more self-sustaining. So, for example, we've had Dell sponsor food, ESRI sponsored food. ESRI is now sponsoring the full event in August. And I'm looking at a couple different corporate sponsors for our event coming up in November. But I'm trying to see how well I can make this. It really is a good event for, frankly, corporate folks to be able to present their products, present their services, and as a consequence, and I've been a funder as well for my company, is present what we do, and then offsets the costs associated with putting the forums on and bringing people together. We've actually had a couple real estate brokers, a little bit in home builders. We've had a couple one-off discussions with them, really presenting to the local brokers and home builders what information is available. A lot of times, and we've talked about that yesterday, people just don't know what we have. And Matsu and Muni as well has been really generating a lot more information in the past 3 years than in the past years, and making it much more accessible. This is just a quick thing. This is a data survey I did. I didn't get a lot of responses, but it was data you have and data you want. So among all those participants, you can imagine they responded, some of them responded to what they want to see more of or what they happen to have. So certainly the borough happens to have a lot of data. And then data you want. A lot of times, if you don't know, utilities are always seeking subdivision information from the borough or a city. And then having a better access to the information. So for example, MTA is doing a big effort in terms of changing the technology of which they have their GIS layers, so they can actually have an auto feed from the borough's, frankly, authoritative data source about property data into MTA systems. And they rely on the borough to have the most current imagery data, as well as partial information and subdivision information, and to have that more automated than having to manually get PDFs, do red markups, and the back and forth traffic that can happen through, say, email. So we've had 13 forums, about 30 different organizations. Wish there was a lot more. A lot of it lands on me to figure out how to, with the time that I have available in the project that I have through Matsu, to try to put those connections together. And there's been rather small funding. This is not a project I do about it. Frankly, it averages out in a day and a half a month of my time right now. Would love to do more because it really does take some heavy lifting to make the connections. There's been a huge success in knowledge sharing. We get about 40 people that attend each event. I've probably had about 120 distinct individuals attend the events over the last 3 years. There's more data available in more ways, particularly by the Matsu and the Muni. The statewide GeoPortal, it has a lot of fits and starts and I can't talk to it completely, but I'm hoping that actually has some legs and it becomes a much more rich platform going forward. The initial cooperative efforts, we started working groups back in 2016, 2017. A little bit of a difficult thing, but we tried to do like a joint application between the Muni and the Matsu. And then the Matsu worked with DNR on data standards and metadata, directory, if you will. Again, fits and starts with declining staffing at the DNR as well as at the Matsu really were some problems. And then partnerships. I'd love to say that those partnerships are in place. I'm crossing my fingers we can get those done by the summer. They've been drafted 18 months ago, and then Matsu Borough Matsu Borough is really who I'm looking for to partner with Wasilla and with Palmer. You might know a little thing happened last July that kind of disrupted everything. And so that set us back a little bit. And then I don't want to, call out names or groups, but then we went to legal to review the partnership. So it's been hung up a bit. But I think we're through that. I promise that we're through that. I go meet with the Matsu tomorrow. So, but we're calling them technology partnering agreements, and it's really straightforward. Here's all these services that are available from the borough. Wasilla, Palmer, sign here if you understand how you can use those accounts and how you can use that data. But more to do. So identify and prioritize and publish more data, grow partnerships and coordinate better, engage local groups and companies. You saw the few that I've engaged with already, including I've also talked to Matsu Health Foundation. And if you don't know, it's a fairly much a juggernaut in Matsu Valley in terms of a coordinating and funding source for a lot of nonprofit organizations in the Matsu Valley. And a lot of good work. But I'm talking with them, and there's some specific projects that I've actually highlighted that are supported by the Matsu Health Foundation, like the Human Services Transportation Plan that's been adopted by the Matsu Borough Assembly, but that's going to be coordinating private and public shuttling and transportation services in the valley. That's the idea anyway. There's over 20 different entities that provide shuttling or bus services in the Matsu Valley. A lot of dead-end runs, a lot of empty vehicles. Can we coordinate this better and for maybe a better or lower cost for the people who need those kind of public transit rides in the valley? Anyway, and then support portals, data standards, authoritative data, classification, and privacy. We talked about privacy again today. We haven't touched on that much in the forum the last couple of years, but it's a very important, critical thing. And that's just the website, and I'll provide some information about how to access that. But I try to keep this relatively current, sponsors, participating organizations, and recent news, and some data on the far right corner of local data portals. Smart community challenges. This is probably nothing that's unfamiliar to us. But decreasing budgets, privacy, concerns about sharing, lack of stakeholder participation, incompatible technologies, data silos. This is my awesome map, right? Now, is that Alaska? Yeah. That's probably any state USA. But this is what you're dealing with. I did want to call out an example presented to us in February by DOT and Public Facilities. Is a right-of-way application. They have built an application to make it easier for the private sector, frankly, public sector, other agencies to find out what is the true and complete right-of-way information in a given geography in the Matsu and the Kenai area as well as Anchorage. So they have a right-of-way app. This is all the data sources, or the ones that you compare and confirm data with. So it's just it's rather eye-opening, and it's a rather simple question, right? What's the right-of-way at this intersection? But they've made some huge efforts in the past, I think, couple of years working on this. ESRI touts the data hub and the government helping to support what is essentially a platform, the government as platform and collaboration. It's not easy. Still gets complex. To make it easy, is actually complex. And then responding to some of the challenges. So common data standards, and that's really trying to call people in the room, probably amongst all yourselves of the IT agencies, groups in your groups, but is to identify what are the things that we need to be standardized on so we don't have collisions when we try to tie data together between two agencies. Partnerships towards common goals and objectives, leveraging new data methods and technologies. All the stuff is rather ubiquitous now with mobile technology. Support joint projects. We've tried a little bit of that with Matsu Borough and Safe for the Muni, and with the DNR. DNR has been a huge supporter of the Alaska Smart Communities. I have no fewer than 4 people from DNR at each forum. And then continue the forums. You know, Eric, he just kind of wonders, you know, does he keep on helping to support the forum? And I ask everybody in the room, please continue, right? Because it's really the only conduit that we have to understand who the players are from a business data use side or from a technology side to make those connections and know what data is available, just like what you're starting to do here. As an example, this is one of my presenters, Austin City UP. This was actually initiated by an entrepreneur down in Austin, but it's worth a look. This is a private organization that's trying to spur public-private partnerships, leveraging Austin area government as well as private sector to address community needs, any number of things. So it might be sensors on a street. It might be workforce development in a community. Might be in trying to improve city services. But he actually had a presentation about 2 years ago that was well received, and it's worth a while to kind of look at how another city is just trying to foster. They almost meet weekly on different topics, almost like a chamber of commerce, but on different projects and technologies. So I guess in my last few slides, it's just I'm trying to figure out what I see, and I've talked to a number of people in the last 2 days. I'm trying to the next 3 or 4 slides about fostering the goals of a smart community. Look at your own operations and customers. What are you getting asked about? Considering what to make easier for your citizens that you're responding to, your customers. I say businesses as well because a lot of customers are business customers. Engaging with citizens directly and the businesses and what they want, engaging executive management and departments on common goals, and avoiding the data silos, using APIs instead. Particularly, I think I might have mentioned this, but Rancho Cucamonga brought this up 3 years ago. No, they don't have a data warehouse. They just have a hub that connects to the authoritative data sources that support everything that they're showing to their residents. Okay. Contributors. So I talked to a gentleman at Pinellas County a couple of years ago, and this kind of goes back to my talk with him. What were some contributors to their success? Partnerships with the cities, obviously, and those agreements I mentioned. Understanding that GIS, in their case, is very GIS driven, is a foundational enterprise system. It's not a one-off system. Data governance, executive sponsorship. They have a regular steering committee that meets quarterly, commit to some best practices, of which those are pretty well codified in terms of what to do on a smart community or an enterprise platform, and having an entrepreneurial attitude. Lessons. This comes from also from him at Pinellas County. Imagine the city as a platform. Start with issues you want to address. We started doing that obviously today. Connect and don't. Again, there's so much. That's a common thread in a lot of these slides. But connect. Don't recreate the data. Common thing we do at the Matsu Borough is we're trying to identify and kill different older databases and stick with a standard platform if it fits the purpose of what the mission is. And it's constant attention to that. Engage the tech community and citizen groups. Build your own internal analytic capacity. And frankly, the ability to ask questions. I just want to bring this up is I guess I think I have a slide that addresses this, but I'll just bring it up now. I work a lot in different state agencies up here in Alaska. There's a lot of big focus, rightly so, on data processing. I'm not as familiar with the analysis side of how much effort and budget is attributed to the analysis of the data that's being processed. But I've worked in the private sector for 20 years, and I'm often focused on the analysis and use of the data, not so much the processing of the data. There's a place for both of them, obviously, right? But it's trying to turn that corner and having everyone have an interest in trying to, what other things can we divine from the data that we have that makes your customers happier, or feeling better served, or your businesses, and reduce the static that they have trying to do what they're trying to do to support development projects, big projects, et cetera. So prioritizing using the data. Eat the elephant one bite at a time. So common phrase, but I talked to the gentleman, he's the IT manager for DHSS. Talked to him at lunch yesterday, and I said, do you have any divine guidance? He says, bits at a time, right? At the same time, you still need a framework of which you're heading towards a common platform or a common goal. Seek data that's already being published. So I spoke to San Diego a couple days ago. I said, do you have any divine guidance? And what they've done is they have about 80 data sets categorized by crime, city management, budgets, public works, a number of things. So it's a data repository, pretty well indexed, and so I can go ahead and consume those. But they said they started with the things that we do every day, publish every day, or we get requests about every day. And that made it real easy for them to essentially publish in the last 2 years the 80 data sets that they have published. They'll release another 50 data sets this year. And actually, they're online to deliver a data warehouse, which is a whole nother level of project. And I'm not advocating that here. A huge effort is just getting that repository in a common platform, regardless of how tuned and integrated it is for a warehouse. And then I'll have this deck available, but these are just a dozen links to points that I've talked about today, and just a few contacts. Principally the people who are largely involved with our Smart Communities Forum. So, okay, I think I did pretty good.
You were perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. So we're going to have a chance to ask Doug questions after Brendan's presentation, and what we'll do is have both of them come up and you'll have a question and answer session. So next, what I'd like to do is introduce Brendan Babb. Brendan is a creative problem solver focused on improving government through civic tech, open data, and innovation. Brendan is the co-captain of Code for Anchorage, where he originally started collaborating with the Municipality of Anchorage 6 years ago on civic tech projects. This led him to becoming the first Chief Innovation Officer for Anchorage. Brendan is also, Brendan is also the director of a Bloomberg Philanthropies 3-year innovation grant for an I team. And that's the letter I, not what we do. I teams help city leaders drive bold innovation, change culture, and create an ongoing ability to tackle big problems and deliver better results for residents. Brendan has a background in mathematics and programming and has worked as a software developer for many Anchorage companies. Today, he will explore lessons learned from running an innovation team and launching an open data portal in Anchorage's City Hall. He'll cover behavioral insight projects, civic tech projects through Code for Anchorage, challenges opening data and using it, and next steps. Please join me in welcoming Brendan Babb. So you've got until 3:40.
Okay, cool.
Thank you very much. I realize I need to edit my LinkedIn bio based on that thing there. I'll do that on the plane flying back. I know it's late in the day. I really appreciated the presentation before and covered a lot of ground. And I talked to Doug. Doug's been great spurring these kinds of conversations between communities and try to make sure I don't overlap too much of some of the stuff he covered. I also want to make it interactive, so I'll have some questions for you in a little bit. So I'm just really good at failing. Is really I've had a lot of jobs where people just let me fail over and over, and there's very little repercussions for me, so it's been great. So my background's in genetic algorithms, and this is basically evolving a car, but it doesn't know what a car looks like. It just creates a random shape, a random number of wheels are attached, and then how far it drives along is the fitness function, and it's a survival of the fittest. So if we had live internet, you could see this eventually start looking like a car or looking like something different. But I've done a lot of work with evolving stuff. The nice thing is you're not going with the way we've always done it before. You're letting computers come up with totally new ways to do something. I also noticed this when someone from a different field comes in to work in government or work in a different thing, they're allowed to ask questions of like, why do we do this? Why do we always, and people tell them why they do it, and they're like, well, could we do it this other way? Kids also get a lot of liberty of asking why we do stuff and coming up with different ideas. So this is an evolved antenna that was for a satellite, trying to figure out the best way to hit a certain frequency that they had on a satellite. If you ask someone at work to go out and come up with an antenna like this, and they came back into your office with this, you'd probably fire them. You'd probably like, look, this is serious. We're trying to do an antenna here. But it turns out, evolving these and then testing them over and over, that this works the best for the specific problem they were trying to solve. And then, so my background is using this on Mars rover image compression using genetic algorithms. I've been lucky to work with the University of Alaska, and we were able to file and receive 2 patents on image compression, trying to make the images that the Mars rover sends back more clear when you open them up with their existing technology. So super lucky someone paid me, and I spent 4 years just failing stuff over and over and over again. So the challenge in government is we don't get as much freedom to fail. We expect our iPhones to have the latest, newest features. Corporate companies, we want them to do R&D and come up with new things that dazzle us all the time. And to do that, you have to have the room to fail. You have to experiment, try stuff, you have money. In government, when we do that, we get beaten up for wasting taxpayer dollars, and we often get written up in the newspaper. So there's great people in government. Everyone I've met is fantastic and wants to help people, but they're not often given the tools to implement solutions that they know would work better, either through policy or having enough time or space. They're kind of under-resourced and overworked. I used to work on Photoshop, and I would do stuff. I was always on deadline, and I would do this thing that took 20 minutes, and I knew in the back of my head there was like a 2-keystroke way to do it, but I never had the time to spend like 2 days to learn what that was. So I just always was doing what I knew worked. So I'm just going to talk about a brief case study in bus data. This was the Muni impressively had GPSs on their buses at least like 10 years ago, and had a way for you to track if the bus was going to be late, which in an Arctic community is a big thing. Like if you're out there, you want to know if you just missed the bus, if it's not coming again for another hour. So they had this information, which was great. And at Code for Anchorage, which is just basically, Code for America has these brigades. There's 77 across the U.S. They're volunteers. I'm the co-captain, which just means I pay for the pizza and beer and get the meeting room set up. But there are people that have tech skills or don't, but just want to try to make government services better. So we meet every 2 weeks for 2 hours and just hack on stuff. And hack just means just try to come up with different solutions for stuff. So the cool thing I noticed about this one time was that there's a text interface. If you look at this URL, there's a stop ID 2406, and this just provides a text version of when the bus is going to arrive. So we started scraping this, and a friend of mine worked on this. Actually, we got it working on a Raspberry Pi he got it working at a Raspberry Pi on his house, like I think Christmas of 2015, just a server thing. But basically, what we do is you just text in the bus stop ID or at here 99, and then it goes and hits that. It knows when the bus is supposed to arrive in real-time information and just texts this back to you. And we went with text messaging because not everyone had smartphones in 2016 when we started on this, and we wanted it to be available for as many people as possible. Also, we're secretly trying to bring the flip phone back into style. We're not going to go to pagers, but we could make a fax version of this too if we wanted to. So then this part here just talks about how we're also using IBM Watson, because it turns out people say addresses. They're like, oh, you're going to City Hall, or you're going to Beartooth, or you say these things that aren't the actual addresses. And we needed a way to kind of interpret that so people didn't have to type in the exact address for City Hall. So it uses a Google Maps API and IBM Watson API. And it turns out we put in a Easter egg here. You can say knock knock here on the right here. Because it turns out that a knock-knock joke is actually just an algorithm. You just say knock-knock, and whatever you respond, boo, boo-hoo, you just add who to the end of it, and then you just pretend it's funny, whatever they say. So this was just like a little extra thing. And then the other thing is we put this information, we had bus route information. We scraped it initially, and we put it in a format that Google Maps could accept. So here, over here is a demonstration of real-time bus data, but there's a certain data standard GTFS that Google Maps accepts. And so now you can see that the bus is delayed slightly, and just maybe stay another minute having coffee and then go out and catch the bus. Open data standards take a while to occur. The one for buses was kind of the first one, and there's I think 300 cities now that use it. It started in Portland about 10 years ago. I made an animation, but it's hard for it to show up here to see how it spreads across the country. But the nice thing is when you have this format, you have public-private partnerships where people can, it might not make sense for a company to build a mapping application for Anchorage because the population is too small. But maybe it does for LA, or maybe if it can work in 300 cities, it makes sense for me to write an application that can use this public information. So on the next slide, whoops. So this is, here's Juneau. If I was going to go to Costco right after this talk, this is the route I would take. It has the bus information and can tell me how to get there. This is Move It, which is a different smartphone app. And then over there is Transit on the right. That's also the Costco trip. But they all consume a certain format. And when you make that data available, it just instantly works. And the great thing about that is a lot of people love to come visit Alaska. So you have tourists that use something in Ohio. They're used to that. They get off the plane here, and they open their app, and it just works. It works in Google Maps and all this stuff. So you don't have to have something that's city-specific if you're using these open data standards. So I partnered with the Muni. They were great to work with. They actually put the information on their bus signs, and there's a bus stop ID on there. So they talk about how you can text in the bus stop ID. They talk about Google Maps and some of the other stuff that they have. And so Code for Anchorage is currently maintaining that application, but we're looking to move it over to the Muni. I have to be very careful because I also work for the Muni, so I wear multiple hats, and I don't want to take advantage with pizza and beer, slave labor of volunteers to do what I need. So this is, I just created these stats this morning. This is how many text messages come in. So about 1,200 a day of people are using this. And that's just a text message in, and then we reply back. So 2,400 messages a day. Over here is about the number of unique users, which is about 400 a day. Down here is browser users. And what we're trying to do is if you have a smartphone, we have a better interface where in the text message we say, or you can use this browser thing. So we're trying to upsell them to the browser thing because it also, we don't have to pay for a text message, which Code for America is currently paying for the text messages. I went to the Code for America Summit last week, and someone kind of came up and they're like, hey, we're noticing Anchorage is really racking up some texting costs. We've kind of been letting you do that for 2 or 3 years, but it'd be great if you could, we're racking up about $350 that they're paying for in texting costs. So, but I'm talking to Transit, they're all cool with us moving to having them pay for that cost. So then the next thing I want to talk about is property tax information, which is super exciting. I know you guys were like, God, I hope he talks about property taxes. So this is just neighborhoods by the year they were built. And this was a CD that Code for Anchorage we purchased from the Muni. And it cost $300 to get, which was the cost of the time for them to get it off the mainframe onto a CD. So they're just recouping costs. And what we were trying to see was just like, what do the neighborhoods look like? What decades? Like, you have Government Hill, or you have some of these sections you can kind of see by different colors when subdivisions, like there's a lot of red here when subdivisions came in. Unfortunately, where stuff went away from the earthquake and then people rebuilt on it. But now I work for the Muni and helped launch this open data portal. Now we have this property data in Socrata, and I worked with property appraisal and provided the information. So now you can go grab this information and search it and hit it with an API. Every data set we put on here, you can export or download. You can download all the data if you want. And the great thing about open data, which not everything should be open data, but if I want to grab this information, normally working in the Muni, I'd have to go talk to property appraisal and find out who has the data and get the Excel and talk to them. If my neighbor had, if my coworker had it, but they're on vacation, then I have to wait till they get back. When it's open, I can download this data at 11 p.m. in my pajamas, which is nice. Not that everything has to be that, but it really, I'm convinced innovation has a lot to do with, I have an idea, I want to know if it makes sense. I need to test this in 20 minutes, or I'm going to think about something else. Like, to keep the momentum alive. If you have to wait 2 weeks to find the answer to something, it really kind of curbs creativity. So this is just some visualizations, pretty simple, showing 1983. We had a ton of houses built during that time. This is we're trying to figure out how to spur housing in Anchorage. So this is just a quick map of showing someone's like, oh, what have we built in the last 3 years? And I'm just able to quickly generate a map like that. I was super excited because I was born in Fairbanks, but lived in Anchorage most of my life. The museum wanted to do a discussion about, Design Forum wanted to do a discussion about housing in Anchorage. So they took some of the data, they hired some people, and they visualized it way better than I can. But I was excited because this data was on the museum wall, and there's some stuff over there. There's one there that tells about the housing material used, which is kind of like wood or steel. It's the Three Little Pigs map where it's like, oh, brick, straw, and how that occurs across the year. The other thing is you can use the data to communicate to journalists. This is private data, so they had to make a request to GIS, and we provided it, kind of redacted. But this was after the earthquake, November 30th, and we went and analyzed some houses to know if they were structurally sound. We had something with snow plows where we were plowing snow. People didn't have the snow plowed on their streets. We started communicating how much snow had been plowed, like number of elephants, how many elephants worth of snow, and kind of communicating that data and having a live API so that the news article would be updated when people went there. They could see how many, it wasn't like, it did not solve plowing in front of your street, but it let people get an idea of how, like, government people are working hard. They might not have hit your street yet, but this is how much snow, this is how big the problem is that they're solving. And then the key thing I want to stress is put the data where people already are looking. Put it there, because it's going to be really hard. This is a restaurant review for Moose's Tooth. We do restaurant inspections. We have it on our website. I would challenge you to a 2-minute challenge to find it right now. But we have that data, and there's a certain format that Yelp accepts, so we publish that data to them. Because when you're looking up a restaurant, when you're deciding between 3 people, where should we go to lunch, you're not going to go to the individual Muni website to check out these health things. But if it's where you're already looking, like here's the health score, it's 100 out of 100 for Moose's Tooth. And if you want more details, you can drill down, or you can see this information. So it's kind of a weird public-private partnership, because Yelp is kind of where people look, and then Google Maps is what we use for finding stuff. And then we have, this is data.gov, and it's trying to kind of find all the data that people have in various cities and states. It captures a lot, so it's not the greatest solution yet. But when I type in Alaska, this is how many data sets are related to Alaska. But there might be a US one. I didn't drill down to see if you just need to mention Alaska to show up in here. Here's the Municipality of Anchorage. So because I have a Socrata data portal, I am producing JSON that I can feed up to this. And so anytime I add a data set, within a day, it'll go up to data.gov. So if someone at the US level is looking for that, they can drill down into where we are. And so dog names. This is where we go to the interactive part here. So I knew that we had dog name data because we register dogs. So I put that data set out there just for fun, kind of. So the question I'm going to ask you is, this is code for Anchorage. We created a dog name game where you have to guess which dog name is more popular, where two, it's kind of like a hot or not type thing. And this is one of the members' dogs was there. This is a staged photo. He could care less about this application. But my question to you, and I have a book, which this is just like horrible because there's a story about the city of Anchorage and their work in the book, so it's just blatant self-promotion. But I'm curious, what do you think one of the top 10 dog names in Anchorage is? Wait, who said Max? Okay. I thought Denali would be up there. So this is how the game looks, and we'll get to the winner. So you choose between Buddy and Rodeo. There's an advanced one where it only differs by 1. So like Buddy might have 50 and Rodeo has 2. The other one, it only differs by 1, which is super hard. But if you go through all 10, at the end, it's like, hey, want to get your dog name in the game? Register your dog. So it's like a slight push to go register your dog. Hasn't had a huge impact, but it's a slight way. All right. So Denali is down there. I was trying to see. Max, I'm going to give it to Max because it was number 2 at the time of this. So here's but Denali definitely is there. Here's some of them. I thought these would be higher up, like Kenai, all the. It turns out that Bella, because I have other data geeks in other cities, Bella's the #1 name in New York. It's also the #1 name in Pittsburgh. I don't know if it has to do with the Vampire Twilight series. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's a certain time when that happened. Here, so I'm not consistently grabbing the data. I have to ask someone to send me an Excel spreadsheet. But this is over 4 time periods. I'd like to figure out a way to see how dog names trend. Bella just ranks #1 at all the time. But there's some that like shot up all of a sudden. This is like a cumulative thing here. I can't remember which one like jumped in. But anyway, this is too much on dog names. Nice thing, the Daily News wrote a story about the dog names. It's just kind of a fun entryway into open data. So hopefully they'll come for the dog names and stay for the property tax data. I'm not sure how it'll work. The other thing we did at Code for Anchorage, and now it's part of the state, or we're trying to figure out how to integrate this, is this is a WIC pre-screener. So WIC is nutritional benefits for women, infants, and children. And there's certain questions you can answer to know whether you should apply or not, because the application forms we have are quite long. So if I see a long application form, I'm like, yeah, I'll do that tomorrow. But if I could be in line at the grocery store and answer 10 text messages and have it say like, oh, you probably would qualify, that would be useful. So this is what we have. This is actually on the State of Alaska website here. And this is just a quick pre-screener. And then it tells you if you'd probably be eligible or not. So it helps you get extra information on whether you should continue the application process. It doesn't apply for you or anything like that. But the nice thing is, if you opt in here, we have your phone number. If you opt in to get messages later, and one time the Food Bank of Alaska was helping people do SNAP. We have the one for SNAP as well. And they were going to be at the Mountain View Library from 3 to 5 on a certain day. So we texted people the night before in the zip codes next to it and just said, hey, Food Bank of Alaska is going to help people with SNAP applications. Here's what you need to bring if you want help. And 6 of the 6 people they helped came from the text messages. So it's like giving people timely information just at the moment they want to use it. So the other nice thing is this is translated into Yupi, and this was a balance screener that doesn't work anymore. But to check your SNAP balance, you could just text in that incredibly long EBT number. But the cool part is when you have these API and services, I'm not translating the number back into UPIC. I'm just translating the message, because if I'm asking just for a number or someone's address, those are pretty standard in almost all the languages. So we had this in Russian, UPIC, and Spanish, and it really lets you serve more people. All right, so I'll quickly go over the iTeam. It's going to be a blur. So I'm super lucky that we have a Bloomberg Philanthropies iTeam grant, and it's a 3-year, $1.5 million grant. And the goal is to start an innovation team in City Hall and hopefully, like startup money, hopefully make a case for it, make it a department later on or a division. So we're lucky to have a bunch of other people, other cities. I was just down in Durham 4 weeks ago. They were hosting a conference, but it's great to have all these partners across the U.S. We were super lucky to get Michael Bloomberg to visit to award. The museum got a grant, a public arts grant, for looking about climate change and innovation and resiliency by having a building with artists that are collaborating and spinning things out of that. So Anchorage is super lucky because we have, I think, 5 of the 7 government innovation programs from Bloomberg Philanthropies. I think we have more than any other city. And that's a credit to the mayor and his staff of really applying for stuff. Like if I ask Ethan to show up for a really early video conference, he will show up. And when we got the innovation team grant, they told us no other mayor was in any of the other things. So I really appreciate his support. One of the things we were talking about here, I'll just go on a quick tangent, was earned income tax credit. And Alaska is ranked 51st out of 50 states in DC for people who are eligible but don't apply for it. And there's actually great IRS tax data that we discovered that shows the percentage of people that do this. And this money is if you work, you can get this credit. And if you have up to 3 kids, it's based on that. So it can be up to $6,000. And the thing we learned is you can apply for it up to 4 years back. So we are searching for this unicorn family that will get $24,000 all at once. And we are in the learning phases, but we took three households and went to H&R Block and had their taxes done and paid for it and interviewed them. And it turns out doing other people's taxes is almost as stressful as doing your own taxes. I was like, why are my knees tight in this? This isn't my form here. But one thing that Michael Bloomberg told us was in New York, they have state earned income. So they would send people a pre-filled out income tax form. They had the information. And this is something I'm really curious about in government. Like we're playing this weird poker game where we're like, hey, tell us what you think we have information on you. And then we'll tell you you're wrong or we'll tell you yes. Like if we already have the information, why don't we just say, would you like this service? Like when I was in college, I used to get offers for credit cards. I was already pre-approved. Who knew? I was a freshman and already pre-approved. But can we do similar things with the information we have, make things easier or be proactive? This is the quick behavioral insights thing. This is what we send to people. If you got a speeding ticket like 3 years ago and never paid it, we send you this Nigerian scam letter that talks about like how you owe us money, and it's just a wall of text. And I think there's something where it doesn't even tell you what it was for. Like it just tells you you violated AO 74674. I mean, who would do that? What a bastard. So Behavioral Insights is basically just coming up with different ways to communicate information. You want to make stuff easy and then just testing it. Having it, basically it's an A/B testing. But you want to divide up 2 groups and you want to have the same number of people that like Madonna in both groups. So you really have to kind of randomize what you do, which makes it a little harder to do in government. Anyway, we had a one-day workshop where we went over techniques. We had a police officer. We broke people into groups and they could go talk to different groups to find out how the process worked. We had 3 people from Treasury. Treasury was great because this was their letter originally. And we had 2 Treasury people in one group and one in the other. When they started talking trash between the teams, I was like, oh my gosh, things are working now. But basically, we did the lame thing where you're going to win a contest, but we took suggestions from all 3 teams and combined them, which is kind of like getting a tie in a soccer game. But anyway, we made the paper pink. We had a clear call to action of when it was due up in the upper right-hand corner. We told you how to pay. there was a way to contact, this is at third-party collections, there was a way to call and find out if you could do a payment plan, but we buried that in the text before. So they sent out this letter and started testing and immediately started getting phone calls. And the downside to this is they got so excited that the letter was working better that they sent out the new letter to the control group as well. So we had one that was just getting the regular letter, and we needed that to go for a certain time. So we didn't do an academically publishable thing, which I didn't care about because they were so excited. They went on to make other changes, how to garnish more PFDs, how to do this other stuff. This letter cost us $18,000 that my I-team paid to do. And they went on, it's not just the letter, much more. They were super excited, went on to generate $1 million more in revenue in a year. I think the biggest lesson was they learned they could actually change the letter. I went to legal, I went to our municipal attorney, and I'm like, what can we change on this letter? What has to stay the same? He's like, you can change everything on the letter. And once they knew that, then the creativity just really opened up, because when I was lucky when I got there, because I got to be the new guy. I was like, whoa, why do we do that? And I'm not trying to be a jerk, but like, I really don't know. I don't know anything about treasury letters. But people are so used to this is the way we've always done it, that they think it's an ordinance or they think it's a law. And I could ask them like, oh, well, just show me. I'm interested in that without seeming like a jerk. So I'm lucky to have sponsors. Rasmussen has given us a $25K grant to implement, because the I-teams aren't supposed to implement stuff. They're supposed to do quick, small experiments with partners and come up with something that looks like it's going to work and scale, and then that department does it. So the goal is that we don't take the $1.5 million and buy a bunch of snow plows with the money. So Rasmussen was great to also support us to do some of the implementation stuff in Code for America. So just quickly, we're like data-driven design. We want to talk to users, I'm indoctrinated in buzzwords, human-centered design and synthesis and ideate and we're trying to solve problems. We're trying to fail fast, do quick experiments. And really talking to the users is something I'm horrible about doing, because I would much rather have an idea at 10 p.m. at night and just write some code and try it out. I know what people want, but really just going to talk to people, it's harder, but I was really impressed that Fish and Game, they did a survey, they found out what people wanted. It's really valuable, because most government projects, big software projects, you do the requirements and then you build something for 4 years and you never once ask people if it's what they want, and then you have this huge thing. So this is we're doing a lot of stuff with food insecurity. This is a food pantry. We went and we gave people a $15 gift card if they talk to us for 15 minutes. And by the way, I want to say I am a unique case, because I'm not spending property tax dollars. I'm spending Bloomberg money, so people give me a lot more. They're like, oh, what are you doing with our property tax dollars? But really, I think we should want governments to spend their own money to do research and to experiment and to give employees. Everyone in Anchorage has 3 ideas how to make the city better, and every government employee has like 17, and we really need to just get out of the way and explore those solutions that people have. People closest to the problem have the best solutions to the problem. So we're data-driven. I'll speed through this. This was just some stuff. We were trying to look at 3 neighborhoods initially. One thing I thought was interesting, what we learned about SNAP households, is Muldoon is the one in the middle there. And every SNAP family, this is how many people have been working in the family in the last 12 months. Every family has at least one person working in the last year in Muldoon, and 2/3 of them have 2 people working. So the challenge is people just aren't getting a living wage here, and they qualify. It's not they are qualifying for this benefit. This is just a lot more data. So our overall goal was just to try to, if people were eligible for a government service and it was federal dollars, because Alaskans love federal dollars, if we could just get that to come into the economy, and if they could just get a little more, we were trying to represent what choices people had to make based on their median income. If you make $6,000, which is the median thing for Anchorage, you don't have to choose between childcare, healthcare, all these different things. But at the lower levels, you're making choices. And we just wanted sometimes you're choosing between 3 things. We wanted to minimize the choices you had to take. We didn't say what you had to spend it on. We just wanted to give you more money in your bank account at the end of the month. This is a really interesting census data that just shows where people live and work, and it's based on their actual paychecks information. It's anonymized, but what it allows you to see is I'm highlighting a section, and then I can see where people are commuting to work there. And you can actually do it all the way down to the census block level. It gets a little noisy there because Anchorage is small, but there's really interesting data sets that can help you figure out, hey, maybe we need better transportation between here and the airport. We have a lot of people commuting there. This is Waze data, which is another kind of public-private partnership. We are a connected citizen program with Waze, so we push out our road construction data so they can tell people, hey, there's road construction. You should take this detour. And then they give us traffic information every 2 minutes. I haven't used it a ton. This is Louisville using it to analyze traffic studies that they can spin up. Normally traffic studies are about $25,000. This you can just do almost instantaneously. There is cost for the storage. This is storing in the cloud. And then a lot of what I'm trying to do is just people that are eligible for these programs, like let's help them know about them and let's help get them in there if they want to. And because there's like $45 million that we're leaving on the table in Anchorage, like each year. So this is a little more. There's $191 million spent at SNAP retailers in Alaska in 2017. I'm running out of time, so this is the last interactive thing. CourtBot is something we do with the state court system where you can text in your citation number if you have a hearing, and it'll say, hey, is this you? You have a hearing July 5th. Do you want a reminder the day before? And you just text yes, and you guys are welcome to do this. The way you can test it is just send test case to it, because we realized we didn't want to like tell, Bill Smith just constantly be going, oh, Bill Smith, text his citation number. But test case will always have a case for John Doe at 10 a.m. the next morning. So if you guys want to try this, it's just 312-2700, and you'll just get a reminder. When I'm getting my haircut, they send me a reminder like 3 days before, and I text back C, and I'm like, why shouldn't our court systems, you might have this for a speeding ticket or a fish and game violation, and it's scheduled 7 months out. And if you forget that, you can have a warrant out for your arrest, or they escalate quickly versus me. I miss my haircut. I'm getting a little shaggy, but the consequences are far less here. And then we also did one for Election Watch, which is just, all this does is just monitor the election result page every minute. And so, because we noticed people were just refreshing constantly walking around, and just sends you a text message when it comes. And then this is something I think is really interesting. So now we're in the potpourri section of the talk. NYC Opportunity, I just saw a talk on this last week, is they have an API for all their benefits screening in New York City. So as they update that, you can hit this API, find the income requirements, you can find everything, so you can build stuff on top of this now. Another thing I thought was really interesting is, which we have the Bloomberg Arts thing, but is Kansas City had something where they provided data sets and stipends for artists. They have like a First Friday thing like we do, and they're like, hey, for 3 months, we're going to give you this data, and we want you to just create art around it. Boulder, Colorado's copied it. I've been really interested in copying it because one thing I really appreciate, this conference has been fantastic, is it's not just data, it's data and stories. So having other people tell stories or artists reinterpret information, I think is a valuable way for other people to get in there. There's some people, you give them a spreadsheet and they're like, yes, but not everyone's going to be like that. So let me just see my notes here. I think I'm hitting the time, but want to make sure I covered everything. Sorry. Ways, data governance is kind of, so building this data portal is hard because everyone gets excited, you launch it, everyone's still excited, and then you get busy and you don't add any more data to it, which I am guilty of doing. We've added some data, the dog name data, crucial. But really it's hard. You need IT resources, you need people to clean the data, align the data. 80% of the time is making the data usable, and it takes time. And it's not only that it takes time, it's really boring. There's nothing cool you can show from it. The last 20%, you can do predictive analytics, you can do all this great stuff. But I think it's worth it if you can put the investment, because now we have property appraisal data. we're using it for another project unrelated to anything we thought we would in terms of looking at property tax exemptions if people have valid residential or senior, or finding people who have senior exemptions that don't know that they have it. Like I have this creepy thing where I want to send them a birthday card on their 66th birthday and say, hey, happy birthday from the Muni, and you can save $400 on property taxes. That might be a little weird. I'm not sure the best way to do that, but it's a data set that we have that's updated nightly. In fact, I didn't get to all the slides I wanted to right now because at 1:30 p.m. I got an email that an API wasn't working between myself and GIS on our property tax to our parcel data because we had changed the way Socrata had changed the way JSON went there. This is like really wonky, but I was able to change it. She was able to change it on her side because we have these APIs in this way to like, otherwise it could have taken 2 weeks to solve this problem, but we solved it in about an hour. She was really flexible. I double checked everything. So I think when you build these things, you don't know exactly what you're going to get, and you can get people to do work for you. Like Tom Sawyer has this thing where he's painting a white picket fence. People are like, what are you doing? It's like, oh, this is the most amazing thing. You got to do it. And then he gets 4 friends to paint the fence for him. So there are people out there that are interested in data and will do stuff with it and build applications that could be useful. And they could either replace something the government's doing or compete with it. I also think governments themselves should try to leverage this stuff and compete with maybe not compete with commercial, but try to not depend on commercial to solve all of it, but try to provide this data, this platform, and also move stuff forward. And I know there's 20 other things, but that's enough. You guys have been barraged. You've been a great audience.
Hey, come on up, because this is our speaker. This little thing right here so that people can hear you. We've got 10 minutes for questions. So questions, how about Lisa?
Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes I think there are different names for the same thing. The data warehouses sometimes will have, or data warehouses will sometimes standardize the way the data is going into it. So you might have different sources and they'll have the same column names, and they allow you to query things much better. A repository might just be a database of data. Those terms are always shifting, so I'll let Doug weigh in.
How I've looked at it is, I think people have different variations on the definition, but a warehouse is highly tuned for analytic and reporting purposes, right? Whereas a data repository, I look at it, in some ways it's a catalog, right? And that's how they use it in San Diego. I clarified with her. I said, well, you talked about a data warehouse. She's like, yeah, it's not really a data warehouse. It's a repository. And in them, it's a data catalog, and I can't access it right now, but 80 sources put in a keyword. It's all categorized by different types of topics, crime statistics, management, budget, and so forth. And it just lists out, here's a data set available. Click on a data set, crime data, past 3 years. I click on that, and then it says it's available for download in 8 different formats, right? Or it might be available through an API, right? So I can hit as JSON as well as CSV and multiple other formats depending on what your mission is. But a basic consumer is probably going to grab the CSV. But that would just be, it's available, but it's not an integrated data set. It doesn't have a lot of work on transformation and common data definitions. They're still rather isolated data sets, but it happens to be on a single portal.
Yeah, and I would say a lot of these portals now are making it really easy to serve up the API. Like eWIC is a way for people to use EBT to do WIC, which is launching next week in Anchorage, launched in Southeast. But I saw something on the state website, which was all the UPC, all the barcodes for food you could buy that were eligible. And I just took that Excel thing. I downloaded it from the state, put it on my data portal, immediately had an API. And I'm working on online ordering. I want people to be able to use Instacart with EBT to like buy groceries. And I was hoping that we could create a website that only showed eligible products. But when you put these different things together, you can kind of map them together. But that would just be a repository and not necessarily a warehouse.
What motivates a city to invest in being a smart community? Is it just good governing, a visionary leader, and then kind of related to that, it seems easier to do for a city than the state. So for Alaska specifically, should we check in with you often about what we're trying to do as a state?
I think I'm super lucky that Mayor Berkowitz created the position for me, and then there was one created at the state. Someone just kind of took the lead. I think Anchorage, when I talk to my other friends in other cities, Anchorage is unique because they often have counties above them, and we just have Anchorage and then the state. And I can make arguments like, if we improve WIC and SNAP, 1 out of 2 people will, at the state level, 1 out of 2 people will benefit for Anchorage. So I think Anchorage and Alaska have a different relationship than other places. There are tons of great people in the state. Like, I don't know any more than anyone else. Someone just went first and created my position, and that spurred on. Now there's one at University of Alaska. My friend John Wanamaker is like the Chief Innovation Officer. This stuff's kind of growing, but I'll let Doug weigh in.
Well, it's nice what Anchorage did, had that open data policy, 3 years ago or so. But that's also probably based on a number of other cities have been creating these open data policies, but then I think probably were challenged with being able to deliver on some of that stuff. I guess to Amanda's point earlier, though, is people expect it, right? It's just kind of a head scratcher. I'll tell you my personal experience. 4 years ago, I was doing some initial business analysis work at Matsu Borough, and I had to sign my boy up for swim lessons. Well, I felt like it was in 1972. That's when I was that age, and I was getting the swim lessons signed up by my mother. And I said, wow, this hasn't changed in 40 years. And then people, I'm in line, and I have my number and so forth, and people on the phone, why can't we do this? Why can't we do this? So I went, I happened to be doing the process analysis, so I made notes that Saturday morning. And it turned out to be, it was a quite involved exercise. I won't go into it, but it's a fairly involved process flow in terms of the information you get to get your child signed up for a swim lesson. A number of questions that need to get vetted. But in any event, people kind of expect that mobile application to be there. And so Eric had joined about 5 years ago, Matsu Borough, and also sees a lot of friction, paper-driven, everything, right? And a form for this, a form for that, control over a particular stovepipe database in a particular department. And it's just a head-scratcher because you see the inefficiency. And guess what? There's no new headcount being approved. So the way you get around that is how can we make better use of the data? And him having a private sector background and doing data integration, doing dashboards, working for U.S. military and other entities. And my background, I've been doing management consulting type work for 20 years. I mean, that's what we go into in the 1990s, is trying to identify and make better use of data, eliminate friction in the process, try to make more use of data that's available. And if you don't have it, model it. And that's what I did for a few years, is I modeled data, right, about processes, activity-based cost modeling. But in any event, I think there's a lot of stuff that gets collected. I think people come to expect it, and then you do what you can to test it, pilot it, and see if there's any traction. And in some places, there has been quite a bit of traction on that, as well as there's been a ton of improvements on technology, particularly on marrying up tabular data as well as spatial data to make it a very integrated data, easier to update, so it's easier to deliver for a lot less cost, I would presume, than trying to do that 10 years ago.
But traction come from small success, specific.
Yeah, I mean, getting key wins or financial wins, like saying, we saved or generated $1 million, helps me do another project that might be not as much like, oh, we're doing online fillable PDF for WIC applications, but we're having trouble with the state allowing us to email them in. There's privacy concerns. I mean, the greatest thing about government is you have to serve everyone, and the hardest part is you have to serve everyone. And there are security concerns, but I often think we set up a model of like a sporting goods store where we don't want any shoplifting, so our solution is to never have the store open. And I think that there will be fraud. There will always be fraud and stuff, and that's a big deal, and we get beat up a lot in government for it, but I don't think it scales. If we build something to serve 1,000 people, we might have 10 fraud things, but if we make it do 10,000, I don't think we're going to have 100. I don't think it goes up in the same way, and we need to build things bigger. Also, we have to serve everyone. I could do a startup for Uber for Lear jets, and I have a very niche market, and government's hard. It's really hard to serve everyone, and I appreciate everyone's efforts on it because it is freaking hard. I thought I'd come in and buy pizza and beer for people and get some stuff done, and it's really hard, but it's super rewarding. Making someone's day 5 seconds better by telling them when a bus shows up for 1,000 people, there's no other place that you can scale your impact.
And an important thing I just want to remind too is leverage the existing technologies and tools. You don't need to build it. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. I know years ago when I moved up here and I had this is Alaska. And I said, I know. I lived in 4 states and they all have the same problem. And there's some states or cities that actually have figured this out or have already made some pilot projects and so forth. Let's find out about those before we start reinventing this thing from scratch.
Yeah, and there's also, if there's something you see from another city, just contact the person. Everyone's been super generous. It's like, hey, I like your suit. They're like, oh, I'll make you one and I'll tailor it for you. People want to help people, and if it works in their city, they would be super excited if it worked in your city. And the other great thing, I worked in academia and private, there was competition, and there's not competition in government. People want to see solutions work in other places. So it's been an incredibly generous society that I've experienced so far.
On the pizza and beer front, could you tell us how Code for Anchorage got together, and like what sort of programmers you found?
So one thing I would say we don't do a good job is it's mostly white guys, and we would like to have more diversity. It's our meetup thing is about 100, but there's probably 10 or 12 that come and people cycle in. I would love for Anchorage and Alaska in general to have like tech boot camps, or a way people often want to learn how to code, and we don't quite have the capacity to do that. So if there was a way to say, oh, go to there, and we'd love to plug you in on projects, that would be fantastic. But basically, people are working all day. So one thing is we let people choose what project they want to work on, even if they're redoing a project, because they want to learn new things. Like they don't want to go to a thing and work for another 2 hours. They want to work on something they're interested in. So, and it started about 4 or 5 years ago. I didn't start it, some other people did, and there's a bunch in other cities. And I could give you more information. I know we're going over our thing, but
we have time for one more question. More questions? Are we good? Here we go. One.
What's the project you'd want to do that you haven't got your approval or funding for? But like, man, if we could just do this.
I mean, I'd love to have kind of like MOUs with DHHS and SNAP and WIC and be able to communicate that data. I would love, even if it's not HIPAA data, I mean, we're doing two-way texting with moms and running into some questions about HIPAA, which I know aren't HIPAA, but I need to bring my stakeholders along and find their concerns. But I would want to know if someone completed an application, which I don't feel is HIPAA. If there's a way I could hit DHHS, have Food Bank for Alaska, call them and help them. I think concierge, I don't have a great answer for that, but I'm really trying to work with the state. Online applications, we have a demo of a way to apply for WIC that works, but now we need to do privacy and security concerns, which are valid. And the state has a system that's on COBOL, which is kind of an older system. I mean, it's just kind of what it is. It'd be a huge investment to upgrade it, but if there's ways that we can get stuff to work together. Right now we're working on a project. We ran into someone in Code for America that's running a project for earned income tax credit where they're having people in California get volunteers from Colorado to help them do their taxes. And they said, oh, Alaska, you can join in. So we're running Facebook ads to send people to this that are getting help from Colorado. We just had a mom with 2 kids go through the intake process. So I'm super excited to pull all these things together, connect stuff together. But that's a great question. I should have a better answer right off the top of my head.
Any last comments you want to say, your 30-second elevator speech, because you got 15 floors and.
Well, I guess the main thing for me is I feel there's a lot of lifting that happens in the forums, and a lot of the work that Brendan does is having the energy, having the curiosity, and driving that, and not waiting for somebody else to take the lead, right? I do reach outs to different organizations and so forth. I wish I had a dozen different partnerships that have been spawned in the last 3 years. I've got a couple partnership agreements that are drafted. Now that said, there has been some things that happen naturally, right, between MTA and the Denali Borough, for example. What's the connection? They have address information. They have a GIS platform. They actually started a conversation, and they're leveraging each other's platform as well as the information that Denali has about their latest address information. That helps out MTA, and Denali could leverage that GIS platform. It's a partnership that we got presented a few months ago. So in any event, there's just trying to make those connections. So all I can do is kind of create the opportunity for that forum and for other people to take the lead. I'd love to be able to have people calling me, Doug, do you know somebody? And that's largely what I end up doing, is trying to make some connections and then get out of the way, right? But that's probably the biggest thing is taking the ownership and taking the lead yourself and seeing how you can drive and deliver the work to your customers, and try not to get I guess frustrated or blocked.
I would just create space for your coworkers or your employees to experiment, to let them do small, if they have ideas, like let them do experiments. If it works well, celebrate that. If it goes south, like I have a weird Harry Potter title, Minister of Dark Arts, Chief Innovation Officer. I can fail more than other people can. So I want to celebrate great ideas that are successful. And if they don't work and we do them really quickly, like I've had stuff that on recycling, we spent $500, it didn't work. That's fine. But like I can take the blame or just create this space. The Mayor Berkowitz and I went to directors and we did this crazy cop, crazier cop thing where it was like, we wanted people to give us ideas, but the directors thought it was a trap or weren't giving us ideas. It's like, it's a trap. So he would say, what if we had electric, snowplows or EV snowplows? Or no, I would say, what if we had EV snowplows? And he'd be like, what if we had shared an Uber for EV snowplows? Because I bet the Mat2 doesn't need as many and we could share them. And then the director was like, those ideas are insane, but here is an actual idea I think could work. But kind of creating the space for people to be creative. And it's super easy for me to stand up here and say this. It's really hard to do that. But I would love to collaborate with anyone. The person on my team who tells me to stop saying yes to everything will disagree. But if you have an idea and there's a way to collaborate with the Muni, I am in this luxury of saying, I think that's a good idea. I think we should do that. And that might not, that and a quarter might get you a bus ride. I'm trying to use a malapropism that doesn't work. But if I can help give you permission to do something, or say find another city that's done it, because we are unique. Fishtopia is fantastic. That's a more unique problem that they're solving than maybe Ohio. But a lot of things, all cities are working on the same 5 problems. And if you see somewhere else where it's gone, a lot of people just want permission that no one got hurt when it happened or it didn't cost $7 million. And then I think you can make that stuff happen. But it's super hard, and I really appreciate all your work. It's easier for me to drink 7 cups of coffee and get up here and blah, 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 blah. But this is great stuff. I'm super excited about all the different conversations I heard here and different collaborations, because civic tech is my jam, and I still am discovering new stuff all the time, just from this conference alone.
All right, a round of applause. Thank you very much.